things we're dealing with are threats to humanity unlike anything the world has ever seen before.
We can bequeath our children a greener planet and a more prosperous future.
That's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero carbon.
East Talk. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 5, Just Stop the Tories. I'm Ian Collins and this is the UK's #1 environment-based podcast. If it's green, it's in. Dale, last week we had a bit of a field day, really, because the Tories, true to form, were the gift that kept on giving, and they haven't let us down this week either.
No, I mean, what they do seems crazy to me. It's like you'd think they'd shot themselves in both feet last week with those announcements of saving us all from fake green nonsense, Johnson style. And yet the right-wing press carried those stories as if they're real. And so, where we're coming from, it looks stupid.
Yeah.
Some people are reading that and thinking, wow, thank God for Rishi.
This was the extraordinary agenda of Rishi Sunak saying, we will help you by not taxing feet or something like that. And everyone's going, well, hang on, there was never a proposed tax on
that's right. Or
yeah, we're not going to do it. Well, it didn't exist. So you don't have to do it. There was a whole list of these things. But this week, they've almost gone for bullseye in some respect because the Rosebank oil field has been given the go-ahead. Now, if anything, symbolically and literally was at odds with the entire agenda that the world is getting on with, it has to be this.
It has to be. It's a massive two fingers to the whole world, actually, especially the British people. It comes with the deceit that accompanies all Tory announcements. The claim that Rosebank will lower energy bills is absolute bollocks because no amount of fossil fuels made here can do that. We allow the global market to set the price, which is why last winter we paid 10 times more for our own North Sea gas than we normally did. So Rishi Sunak knows this. He's just talking bollocks when he says this will lower energy bills. And the second claim is, of course, it would give us energy security. Well, it's a tiny amount of oil. The last drops of the North Sea, it'll run out in somewhere between 10 and 20 years from now. I don't see energy security in that. The real energy security, of course, is in renewable energy, and the real lowering of bills is also in renewable energy. And on top of that, I was on the World at One program 2 days ago this week, or maybe it was yesterday, time flies, and this spokesperson for Rosebank claimed that the government weren't putting any money into the building of Rosebank, when the truth is we are funding it with £4 billion so that a Norwegian company can develop it and, get this, take the oil straight out of our country. It won't even be processed here, straight out of our country and sold on the international markets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right?
I'm sitting there going, hang on a second, what the is going on? If you said, okay, let's analyze this from a conservative perspective, like they might ask you to do, for a dissertation on this subject, you would go, okay, now this subject is clearly controversial, but shouldn't be, but it is. However, what the Tories are doing is they're implementing their own market ideas and they're looking at it from an economic perspective and potential prosperity. Now, that would make sense if you weren't just giving all the money away to another country. But so it doesn't even make sense on their own kind of philosophy of basic domestic economics.
It makes no economic sense. We will give away £4 billion to a Norwegian company, and the projections are that in its lifetime, Rosebank will lose us £750 million. So it will pay tax when it starts producing oil, which is what they like to talk about. But the net position for us currently looks like minus nearly £1 billion. Where's the economics in that? That's just crazy. And of course, we then have to pay for the decommissioning because none of the oil companies pay to clean up the mess they leave behind in the North Seas. And that's an unknown price tag. So it's all utter nonsense from an economic point of view. And we know on the flip side that if we spend £4 billion on, for example, solar power projects in our country, we can create something like 30,000 jobs instead of the piffling 450 that Rosebank boast about, and twice the GDP growth as oil and gas investments can. It's just so uneconomic. It's incredible that they're doing it, but it's not about economics. It's about politics. It's about positioning themselves as the hammers of green nonsense and net zero and this kind of stuff, which is what the fake announcements last week were about as well. We're going to save you from a meat tax, but there isn't one, as you said. You know what I mean? They're like,
it was meat. I thought it was feet. There you go. You see, I didn't even read the old shit properly. You see, I love the Norwegians. I love There's nothing wrong with Norway. It's a beautiful place. I just don't think giving them 4 billion quid of other people's money is the way forward.
Is madness.
It's not an unreasonable position.
Well, it's not. We have a cost of living crisis here, right? I mean,
correct. Yes, there are reasons to be cautious.
We have a shortage of money. We can't fund repair programs for schools, and so we have to shut them in case the ceilings fall on the heads of pupils. But we can give £4 billion to the Norwegians to make money from our North Sea to pull out oil that will never land in this country. What do you? Do
you know, I actually thought you died then, Dale. I thought this is the moment. He went how he'd have wanted to go, hissing off the Tories, whinging about them, and doing a podcast.
I can't believe them. I just can't believe them. I'm exasperated beyond words, so I resort to noises.
You are not alone in that, because there is a survey out this week that says 2/3 of people do not trust the Tories on the environment. Well, what a surprise!
What a surprise!
Yeah.
And it's not like they've earned it, is it? Everything they do, everything they say, and it wouldn't matter. I mean, it really wouldn't matter if there was any logic, any science, any economics in what they're saying and what they're doing. If there was anything, any shred of justification other than politicizing the climate and net zero. But there isn't.
No. This was an Ipsos poll as well that was on the back of the new commitments or non-commitments to net zero. And it found that despite the government's efforts, only a quarter of the public perceives these changes as reflecting a long-term approach to climate change. 39% saw them as short-term measures. Well, I mean, you almost didn't really need to ask anybody that, because the Tories themselves laid out their off agenda for everybody to see.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's desperation. They're trailing in the polls badly. They've got nothing to boast about. I mean, they can't talk about their record in office for the last 13 years because it's a disaster. And all they've got is this culture war approach to try and split the country around the green agenda, which is the answer to the cost of living crisis that the Tories have created. The mad irony in all of that is exasperating.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop you, Dale, going to see them next week. Because secretly you love to cuddle a Tory, is that right?
I don't quite cuddle them, but I was a human shield for Therese Coffey last year, if you remember.
Yeah, this was when you were going down the escalator or something. You were going up and she was coming down or something.
No, she was going up as well, but on the opposite escalator, some TV crews were trying to, doorstep her, you could call it.
Yeah.
They were shouting questions at her, and she kept hiding behind me, and I got off the top, and I thought I'd just get out of the way. And she was like following me, keeping me between her and them. And at the end, she said, sorry, but it was weird. It was just weird. I'm like,
When they remake that film, that Whitney Houston movie, The Bodyguard, with Kevin, she's going to be Whitney, you're going to be Kevin Costner. It's going to be all set in Birmingham on an escalator.
Manchester, but yes. Or was it Birmingham? Maybe you're right. Anyway, it's Manchester this year. It starts on Monday, and I'm going down on Sunday, and we've got a little surprise for them. We've made a film and hired some big screens, and we're going to share this film with the conference attendees. I think, and it's in the way that we do. It's about sharing facts and perspectives and hoping to influence people.
When you go, because there was a couple of years ago, of course. I mean, there's a whole book in your attendance to the Conservative Party conference. There's always a tale that comes out of it. There was the time you got refused despite having the accreditation, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first year, which is, I think, 2 years ago now, the Express got me a pass. And then somebody in the Conservative HQ noticed my name and said, oh, no, we can't let him in. And they rescinded the pass. And the editor of the Express wrote to them and said, look, he's a journalist. He writes for the Express. Can you give him a pass? They relented eventually, but they gave me a pass that said Daily Express exhibitor, like in the exhibition hall.
Yes.
The Daily Express didn't have an exhibition stand, so I was a bit odd, but it meant I couldn't go into the press briefing and ask awkward questions.
That was a shame. Or you could have just invented an exhibit to take with you. I don't know what you'd have exhibited.
but I wouldn't have gone to the press briefing. Last year, I got the proper press card, pass, whatever.
Yeah, well, they really, I mean, they don't. This is the stupid thing about political parties, and maybe the Tories have a PhD in this, but you shouldn't be pissing anybody off. And if somebody is outside the tent, as you clearly are, politically and otherwise, then you're the very person they should say, do you know what, come on down and have a look at what we do, to see what we're about. Like any kind of organization, religion, whatever it happens to be, come in and see what we're about, not piss off. I mean, that's the very antitheses of what you're meant to do in a democracy.
Yeah. And in that same year that I struggled to get in, there were some Windrush protesters that had their passes revoked and they simply weren't allowed in. That's how democratic this party is.
Here's a question from somebody called A. I love this. There's no other part of their name, just A. It's kind of Bond-esque, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah.
Anyway, A says, what is your view on small hand-built turbines as part of the transformation to renewables? It's a passion project of mine and thought you'd be the best person to speak to.
Well, look, I think small windmills have got a role to play, absolutely. And up until about 10 years ago, we had a thriving industry, probably half a dozen manufacturers here. Cameron shut the wind industry down and along with it, all of the small manufacturers as well. There's one left running that I know of, and it's ours. It's called Britwind, and we make a 5 and a 15 kilowatt turbine, but they play a great role. The 5 kilowatt is house sized, and the 15 kilowatt is small business sized, and we're exporting them right now all over the world. We're selling them everywhere except in Britain because of the rules that we deal with here.
It's just so funny, isn't it? It's another part of the chapter. We sell them everywhere, apart from where we actually make them.
It's another wonderful piece of unbusiness-like decision-making.
On a similar vibe, Christine says, Dale, you said the wind turbine new planning rules are just window dressing. Could you explain why? I'd love to understand so I could pass it on to the Greens who replaced me after I stood down as a councillor. There you go. Yes, I think this was last episode, wasn't it? You referenced the fact that the Tories now saying that offshore can happen. You said it's essentially bollocks, I think was your word.
It could be. It sounds like me from time to time.
Yeah.
I do go there. But look, so the new rules enacted by Cameron all those years ago effectively banned onshore wind by allowing just one single objection to stop any project and also requiring all wind applications to be in zones that are in a local plan. And these local plans move at the speed of glaciers. So if you were trying to get your site into a local plan now, you'd be lucky to see it in there 5 years from now. And so there was a couple of things used just to push them out. The changes made weren't made to the local plan approach, and they said they would no longer allow one single person to object to a project. I think they've changed it to 2 or something like that, but they weren't specific about how the new process would work. It was just a PR announcement, and there's nothing in that for us.
Well, sticking with windmills as well, because I don't know if you saw this story, but Donald Trump,
I did.
previously, of course, had told the world that you can't have windmills because they kill birds. Now he's moved on to marine life. Donald Trump said that windmills are driving whales crazy. It's driving whales, right? He causing marine mammals to die in numbers never seen before. It was a bizarre tirade in South Carolina. But yeah, he said that the birds died, didn't he? I mean, once in a while, I'm sure a bird does get collared by a windmill, like the bird could get collared by a pylon or anything else for that matter, and that's sad and all the rest of it. But
do you know that windows are the biggest killer of birds? Office windows.
Is that right?
And cats, actually. I mean, cats kill millions. Anyway, I think what he did say also was that they cause cancer. This was back in his heyday as, leader of the free world.
Yes.
Which he's not at the moment.
True. Now the whales are going crazy. You don't want a crazy whale on your hand.
Well, I think we had that in the White House, didn't we, a couple of years ago? Ka-ching.
That's true enough, yeah. So advice to anybody who's bought into Donald Trump's whale crazy caper story?
Just don't, right? I mean, this is Donald Trump. He's not a man renowned for anything remotely logical or truthful. And I think actually we've got a lot to not thank him for in the behavior of the Conservative Party here. Johnson in particular, but Sunak seems to have picked up this ball and run with it. They talk absolute bollocks as if it's the absolute truth and that nobody's ever going to catch them out.
From windmills to windfall, this was Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, has called for the world's richest oil states to pay a global windfall tax to help poorer nations combat climate change.
Yeah, I saw that. And this idea of kind of reparations and money to help adaptation and that kind of stuff. I understand it, but I think it's putting the cart before the horse, because I think if we can raise a shit ton of money, we should spend it first on getting to net zero so that we stop increasing the rate at which the climate is changing. We've got to do that first before we try to mitigate and adapt. Otherwise, we're like bailing out a boat with a leaky bucket.
Here's a question from Jack, who says, why are the Scottish Greens still promoting heat pumps as the way forward?
Why is anybody still promoting heat pumps as the way forward, I would say? And I don't have an answer. I think some people clearly have a commercial interest. The Tories, it was Johnson actually, said, look, we'll have this national program, heat pumps are the answer. You know, we've costed it and found all the wrinkles with it that he would have never looked at, because he just listened to a lobbying group and said, yeah, this is the answer. But he also never really set about trying to implement it either in classic Johnson fashion. The thing about heat pumps is, they've definitely got a role to play, no doubt about it. And for some people, they work really well. But unfortunately, for nearly 25% of homes in Britain, they won't work ever. And for another 25%, you need a massive upgrade of insulation and heating systems and that kind of stuff. I won't go into the long list of things that are wrong with the idea of a national program, but they have a role to play.
One from Rosie. I'd like practical advice on how every day people can take action against fossil fuel giants. Because we've said many times, haven't we, that leading a more environmentally considerate life is not about you doing everything. It's about everybody doing a bit. And if everybody did, then the jigsaw puzzle comes into place. And I think that's a reasonable question, isn't it? You know, what can you practically do? Because we hear all the headlines. There's a lot of people sitting at home in their armchair thinking, well, what am I meant to do about this?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, if you step back and you look across the piece, energy, transport and food are the three big things that we all spend our money on every day. 80% of our carbon footprints are in there. And it is about how we power our homes, how we travel, and we can make different choices in all of those three sectors. Some of those choices will cost a little more, some of them won't. So really it's about, doing whatever you can afford to do and feel like doing. The easy one is just stop eating meat. I mean, it's not a fossil fuel thing, but stop eating meat. Or reduce eating meat, as you say. You haven't got to go all the way, just take a step down the road. But the biggest thing we can all do is vote at the next election and get this bunch of fools out of number 10.
And should we talk food as a final subject before we get on to another question? Food is something that forms a big theme around this podcast, but huge passion of yours, because when the environment is discussed, people talk about windmills and fossil fuels and all the other bits and pieces that go with it. But you've always argued very passionately that actually the food industry is a absolutely crucial prong to this entire subject.
Yeah, so like it's one of the big three, energy, transport and food, as I mentioned just now, but it's more than just a cause of the climate crisis. The animal farming industry, the intensive animal farming industry, is a driver of the global wildlife crisis that we're facing, the extinction of species on an unprecedented level. I think it's the sixth great extinction of our planet or something like that. That's caused by animal farming. Oxford University have shown that 75% of farmland could be freed up if we just stop eating animals and eat plants instead, which is a mad amount. In our country terms, it's half of our entire country. So it's driving wild animals to the brink of extinction. This is our diet. And also, it's killing us because, there's an epidemic of disease that affects us, particularly in later life, chronic disease, heart disease, cancer, and that kind of stuff, diabetes as well. And this is, I think, where it's particularly relevant because the government allows the food industry to poison us with this stuff, with processed and ultra-processed food that is chock full of fat, salt, and sugar. And that's driving this health problem, along with the fact that it's got animal products in it as well. And this study was so brilliant because our government always says the same thing when they're asked to intervene and make sure that people eat safe food or clean food, healthy food. Firstly, they won't even give advice, let alone change the industry. But they say, we don't want to be the nanny state. But in this study, 90% of people said they think the government should intervene in the food system.
And a final question from June. I love this because this is quite all-encompassing. When can we start a revolution? Brackets, peaceful if you insist.
Yeah, well, I do insist. And I think it's at the ballot box. It's the next election. I can't wait. My entire focus now is shifting to that election and what we can do to really harness the green votes of the country. Whatever your political persuasions, there are so many people in our country that care about the climate crisis, conservative voters included in that. So we're about to launch a new campaign. We'll probably detail it next week, so I won't say any more about it right now.
Perfect. Listen, Dale, we will speak in a week when you return with tales from the Tory conference.
Should be fun, that.
Cannot wait. Have a good week.
Yeah, nice one. See you later.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to follow this podcast from your podcast provider. That way you get each new episode automatically. Leave a review there as well. Really important bit. Follow Dale on social media. That's twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince.
Zero carbon.
East of.